Okay, let's dive into this. We've all heard it right. Certain habits, fidgeting, maybe your desk is a bit messy, talking to yourself, even procrastinating. Sometimes they get a bad rap.
Yeah, definitely. They're often painted as, distractions or signs of laziness, maybe lack of discipline.
Exactly. There's this picture of what smart looks like. Super organized, always on time, quiet, focused.
The conventional image.
But what if that picture's, well, incomplete? What if some of these everyday things, the stuff people criticize, aren't flaws? What if they're actually surprising signs of, genuine intelligence?
That's really the core idea we're exploring today. We've looked at a whole range of sources, psychological studies, research papers, different analyses, trying to see how intelligence might show up in ways we don't typically expect.
And this is where it gets really interesting, almost paradoxical, because the material suggests real intelligence often comes packaged with, surprisingly, humility.
Yes, exactly. Some of the research points towards that Dunning-Kruger idea where, folks with less competence might overestimate themselves quite a bit.
Right.
While the genuinely competent, the really intelligent people often do the opposite. They might underestimate themselves, or they're just very aware of what they don't know.
It's not about faking it then. It's about authentic self-awareness.
Precisely. It's not about projecting smartness.
So our mission here is to unpack these, let's say, less obvious signs, to understand why the sources are linking them to intelligence, and maybe see that being smart looks different than we thought.
Okay, let's get into what the sources actually reveal.
All right, starting with something that seems basic but maybe isn't fully appreciated.
Yeah.
Curiosity. An insatiable curiosity. It's not about already knowing everything.
No, not at all.
The argument is it's about being comfortable not knowing and having that real drive to find out. That's the sign.
And what's fascinating is how the research talks about curiosity. It's not just passive wondering, like, oh, that's interesting. It's described as an active cognitive thing.
Active? How so?
Well, highly intelligent people, according to these sources, aren't satisfied with just surface answers. They ask these really insightful questions that dig deeper, that uncover complexity.
Oh, okay.
This constant questioning, this lifelong desire to learn, that's seen as a major engine for intellectual growth.
So asking too many questions isn't annoying after all.
Maybe not.
It's more like actively building a better understanding of the world. And the sources link this directly to problem solving, even innovation.
And flowing right from that curiosity is open-mindedness. The material we looked at suggests intelligent folks tend to be more, objective when they process information.
Objective how?
They seem to make a real effort to understand different perspectives, even ones they might initially disagree with, before jumping to conclusions.
So not just digging their heels in on one viewpoint.
Exactly. They seem more willing to integrate new info, maybe shift their thinking if the evidence points that way. It's not about being easily swayed, but more about being adaptable in their thought process.
Adaptable thinking, that makes sense.
This kind of open approach, though, it raises a question. How do you handle all that information coming in? And interestingly, another sign that talked up frequently is preferring solitude or being, the quiet type.
Yeah, the old idea that quiet means you've got nothing to say. Or maybe you're just awkward.
Right, the misconception. But the sources suggest this quietness might be less about social stuff and more about needing time for internal processing.
Like thinking things through.
Yeah. Maybe carefully considering thoughts before speaking, or just preferring quiet places where they can actually focus. The research suggests spending time alone isn't always about avoiding people. It's often about creating that mental space for reflection, deep thinking, brainstorming, planning, without all the external noise.
So solitude is like creating the bandwidth needed for those complex mental tasks the sources talk about.
That's a good way to put it. It's prioritizing that internal processing and growth, which gets linked to better problem solving and creativity.
Okay, moving on to how people deal with, life-throwing curveballs.
Yeah.
High adaptability comes up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
When things get tough, instead of just getting stuck or complaining, the idea is that intelligent people are better equipped to actually tackle those challenges, those twists.
The research frames adaptability as more than just being flexible. It's seen as the cognitive ability to actually adjust your strategies, your approach, when circumstances change.
Gotcha.
And the sources connect this very strongly to resilience, bouncing back from setbacks, learning from them. That's seen as crucial for long-term intellectual growth and success.
And that seems to tie into another point. Strong self-control.
Yes.
When faced with, say, emotional triggers or difficult conversations, instead of just reacting impulsively.
Right, flying off the handle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The material suggests intelligent individuals are better able to kind of pause, think rationally, weigh the consequences.
Absolutely. This ability to manage emotions and impulses, it's a huge part of intelligence that goes beyond just pure logic or IQ. The research links it directly to better decision-making, being able to stick with long-term goals.
And part of that self-awareness, that control, seems to be admitting when you're wrong.
That's a big one.
While some people might, try to protect their ego, avoid admitting mistakes.
The sources note that intelligent individuals seem, well, more comfortable accepting shortcomings.
Why is that, do they say?
The reasoning suggested is that they don't tie their self-worth quite so tightly to always being right. They see owning mistakes as a way to learn, to improve.
Like feedback.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some sources even talk about self-criticism not as insecurity, but as this internal drive to constantly get better, refine their understanding, like they're their own toughest critic, intellectually speaking.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit to some traits that feel maybe more expressive, less conventional, like a knack for wit and humor.
Ah, yes, humor. The sources actually cite studies finding a correlation there. Sometimes comedians even score higher on certain cognitive tests.
It's not just about telling knock-knock jokes, though.
No. The research suggests creating or even just getting complex humor involves really fast information processing, spotting incongruities, understanding social cues, having a high verbal skill.
Mental juggling.
One paper called it a demonstration of mental agility, that ability to quickly connect seemingly unrelated ideas, twist perspectives in funny ways.
Oh, and then there's high creativity, another major sign.
Definitely.
Innovative ideas, creative solutions, they aren't just random sparks, right?
Yeah.
The sources paint them as the result of processing information differently, seeing connections others might miss, thinking outside the box.
Right. It makes creative problem solving a really key way intelligence shows itself.
And this brings us to some of those truly strange habits we mentioned at the start.
Yeah.
Habits linked to this kind of creative, unconventional processing, like being messy.
I know, right?
Messy.
Huh.
That feels like the exact opposite of the organized, smart stereotype.
It does feel totally counterintuitive, but some research suggests that maybe a less tidy environment might correlate with a mind that's busy generating ideas, exploring possibilities rather than focusing on external order.
Huh.
There was one study mentioned where people in a messy room actually came up with more creative ideas than those in a neat one. The idea being, maybe the less constrained space fosters less constrained thinking. Their focus might be on abstract concepts, not physical tidiness.
Okay, that's a wild reframing. I like it. What about something like doodling? Sketching in the margins during a meeting.
Yeah, doodling, or even those moments where you seem to space out. The sources suggest these aren't always signs you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
It might actually mean your brain isn't being challenged enough by whatever's happening. Some research implies these actions can paradoxically help you focus on the main information by stopping your mind wandering off completely. Yeah, and some studies even suggested doodling can improve how much you remember from, say, a lecture. It's seen as maybe a form of active processing or just a necessary little mental break.
So not zoning out, but maybe?
Yeah.
Optimizing your cognitive load. Is it similar for daydreaming then?
Absolutely. Deep focus is obviously valuable, but daydreaming also gets strongly linked to high intelligence in these sources.
Okay.
It's not viewed as just being idle. It's seen as mind wandering that allows for internal simulation, working through complex problems away from the immediate task, exploring that rich inner world. The research suggests it can be a way to make connections between unrelated ideas, maybe even lead to breakthroughs.
Huh. So next time someone catches you staring into space.
You're running high-level cognitive simulations.
Exactly. Okay, what about talking to yourself? That one feels inherently a bit odd, especially in public.
It might feel odd, yeah, but studies mentioned in the sources suggest intelligent people might actually do it more often. The thinking is it's using external speech, verbalization, to organize complex thoughts, clarify problems, maybe even boost memory. It's like having an internal dialogue, but out loud.
Oh.
Hearing your thoughts as distinct inputs can apparently help with processing and problem solving.
So you're not weird, you're just using an advanced cognitive technique. Maybe the conversation with yourself is the smartest one available right then.
Huh. Possibly. It's about leveraging verbal processing for clarity.
Okay, what about procrastination? Putting things off. That even showed up on some lists.
Now, this one really challenges the standard view, doesn't it? Procrastination is usually seen as just bad.
Totally. A major flaw.
But the argument in some sources is that for certain kinds of tasks, maybe creative ones or complex problem solving, working under pressure near a deadline can actually trigger intense focus.
The adrenaline rush?
Maybe. It can lead to these bursts of innovative activity, so it gets reframed, not always as laziness, but sometimes as a strategic, maybe high-stakes way of using cognitive resources.
But not all procrastination, surely.
Oh, definitely not. The theory isn't that it's always good. But for some people, some tasks, it might just be their pattern for leveraging pressure to hit peak performance. It's about understanding the why behind it. Sometimes the sources suggest it's not apathy, just different strategic timing.
Interesting. Okay, let's quickly touch on a couple of others that popped up. One was cursing a lot.
Yes. Believe it or not, some research indicates a link between having a rich vocabulary overall and, knowing and using curse words effectively.
Okay.
The idea is that people who use profanity creatively often just command more language in general. It might also link to thinking for yourself, not just blindly following social rules if you think they're kind of arbitrary.
Okay. And being a night owl.
Yeah.
Staying up late, working on stuff.
Yeah, studies draw a link between higher intelligence scores and preferring later hours. The hypothesis is pretty simple. In our modern world, later often means fewer interruptions.
Lighter time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Blocks of quiet, focused time for deep work, for complex thinking.
Makes sense. Now, the one habit from the material that really surprised me was taking cold showers.
Yes. That one was definitely more on the fringe in the sources we looked at, maybe more anecdotal or from less mainstream research.
So not as solid a link.
Not as robustly established as, say, curiosity or adaptability in the core intelligence research. The idea presented was more about deliberately embracing discomfort, like with a cold shower, to build mental resilience. Some proponents claim it helps circulation, which might benefit cognitive function.
But the direct link to intelligence itself is weaker.
Compared to the other points, yeah. It felt more related to self-discipline or maybe resilience, which some sources connect indirectly.
Got it. Okay, so beyond these specific habits, quirky or not, the sources kept coming back to having a really wide range of interests.
Yes, that was consistent. Intelligent individuals often aren't just specialists. They're portrayed more like polymaths or generalists, not confining themselves to one narrow little box.
Keeps things interesting.
And it fuels that continuous learning. It lets them draw connections between different fields, which is vital for innovative thinking. It's about constantly engaging with the world, always wanting to understand new things.
And finally, something super crucial that came up again and again, going beyond just brain power. Sensitivity. Being attuned to other people's feelings.
Absolutely critical. The sources really hammered this home. Intelligence isn't just IQ scores or how fast you process things. Emotional intelligence, EQ, was highlighted as equally, maybe even more important for actually navigating the world effectively.
Building relationships, success, well-being.
All of it. The ability to understand others' emotions, respond with empathy, manage your own emotions. That's a complex skill set, both cognitive and social, and the research firmly links it to a broader, more complete definition of intelligence.
So when we zoom out and look at everything these sources covered, it's pretty clear intelligence isn't just about acing tests or fitting some neat stereotype.
Not at all.
It shows up across this huge spectrum of traits, behaviors, and yeah, even those habits that seem kind of strange. Daydreaming, being messy, talking to yourself, doodling.
And fundamentally, many of these signs, whether it's the deep curiosity, the adaptability, the self-awareness, the creativity, or even the more unconventional ones, they're really about how the brain works, how people process information, adapt to challenges, solve problems, understand themselves and others.
They're different facets of intelligence playing out in the real world, sometimes in ways we wouldn't expect.
Right, and it's undeniable from this material that emotional intelligence, that EQ piece, is a vital part of the picture alongside the more traditional cognitive stuff.
Which really brings us to the final thought, the question for you listening. Which of these signs or habits resonate with you? Maybe things you do or see in others now that you've heard how the sources connect them to intelligence.
How might reframing these everyday behaviors based on what we've discussed change how you think about your own abilities?
Yeah.
Or maybe your learning style, or the intelligence of people around you?
Maybe those quirks you always thought you needed to fix? Maybe they're actually smarter than you realized. Something to think about.